Emma Woodhouse, beautiful, intelligent, and wealthy, enjoyed all the comforts of a pleasant home and a cheerful nature, blessed with nearly everything life could offer. And for nearly 21 years, she had lived with very little sorrow or difficulty. She was the younger of two daughters of a kind and doting father, and ever since her elder sister's marriage, she had taken on the role of mistress of the house at a young age. Her mother had passed away so long ago that Emma retained only a faint memory of her loving embrace, but in her place had come an admirable woman as governess who, in warmth and care, had been nearly a mother to her. Miss Taylor had been part of Mr. Woodhouse's household for 16 years, more a companion than a governess, deeply affectionate toward both daughters, but especially devoted to Emma. The bond between them was like that of sisters. Even before Miss Taylor formally gave up her position, her gentle temperament had kept her from ever enforcing strict authority. And now that any notion of control had long vanished, the two had lived together as the closest of friends, deeply attached, with Emma doing as she pleased, holding Miss Taylor's opinions in high regard, yet largely following her own inclinations. The real drawbacks in Emma's situation lay in the fact that she had perhaps too much freedom and a slightly inflated opinion of herself. These were the flaws that subtly threatened to tarnish her many delights. But since these dangers were still unnoticed by her, she didn't consider them hardships. Grief did come, but gently, not in the form of guilt or discomfort. It was the departure of Miss Taylor that first brought sorrow. On the day of her beloved friend's wedding, Emma experienced her first sustained moment of melancholy. Once the ceremony was over and the wedding party departed, Emma and her father were left to dine alone with no third presence to lighten the long evening. Her father, as usual, drifted into sleep after dinner, leaving her to sit and reflect on all that she had lost. The match itself promised great happiness for her friend. Mr. Weston was a man of excellent character, respectable fortune, appropriate age, and pleasant manners, and there was some comfort in recalling that Emma had always, with generous and selfless affection, encouraged the union. Yet the day remained a dark one for her. Miss Taylor's absence was already being felt in every hour. Emma recalled all the past kindness, 16 years of care, how she had taught her and played with her since the age of 5, how she had devoted herself entirely to Emma's happiness and well-being, nursing her through childhood illnesses. A great debt of gratitude was owed. But even more tender were the memories of the past 7 years after Isabella's marriage, when Emma and Miss Taylor were left to each other, forming a relationship of perfect ease and mutual trust. She had been a friend and companion of rare quality, intelligent, informed, gentle, helpful, thoroughly familiar with the household, invested in its affairs, and especially devoted to Emma, sharing in her every joy, every plan, and listening to every thought without ever offering criticism. How was she to bear the change? True, her friend was not going far. Although Mrs. Weston now lived only half a mile away, Emma knew very well that there was a vast difference between having Mrs. Weston half a mile away and Miss Taylor living in the same house. Despite all her blessings, both natural and domestic, Emma now faced the real threat of intellectual loneliness. She dearly loved her father, but he was not a companion for her. He could not engage her in meaningful or light-hearted conversation. The disparity in their ages, already significant since Mr. Woodhouse had married late, was made even greater by his frail constitution and unchanging habits. He had been ailing his whole life, never active in body or mind, and was in every way older than his years suggested. While everyone appreciated his kind heart and gentle nature, his intellect had never been his strong suit. Emma's sister, though not far away in comparison, just 16 miles off in London, was still too distant for daily companionship. Long, drawn-out evenings in October and November would have to be endured at Hartfield until Christmas brought Isabella, her husband, and their children for a visit to fill the house with warmth again. Highbury, the large and populous village, nearly a town, to which Hartfield belonged despite its private grounds and formal name, offered no real equals to Emma. The Woodhouses were the leading family there. Everyone looked up to them. Emma had plenty of acquaintances thanks to her father's universal courtesy, but not one of them could replace Miss Taylor, not even for half a day. It was a sad change, and Emma could not help but sigh over it and wish for impossible things, until her father awoke, and she had to brighten up again. His spirits always needed tending. He was nervous, easily saddened, fond of those he was used to, and strongly disliked any sort of change. Marriage, being a source of change, always made him uneasy. He was not yet fully at peace even with his own daughter's marriage, despite it being a love match. And now, with Miss Taylor gone too, his gentle selfishness and firm belief that everyone must feel as he did led him to think Miss Taylor had made as sad a move for herself as for them, and that she would have been far happier had she stayed at Hartfield for the rest of her life. Emma smiled and tried to chat as cheerfully as she could, hoping to distract him, but at tea he could not help repeating exactly what he had said at dinner. Poor Miss Taylor, I wish she were here again. What a pity Mr. Weston ever thought of her. I cannot agree with you, Papa. You know I cannot. Mr. Weston is so good-natured, pleasant, and deserving. He certainly deserves a good wife. And would you really have wanted Miss Taylor to live here forever, putting up with all my odd habits, when she could have a home of her own? A home of her own, but what's the benefit of that? This house is 3 times the size, and my dear, you don't have any odd habits. We'll be seeing them often. They'll visit us, and we'll visit them. We'll constantly be meeting. We must start soon. We must go pay them a wedding visit. My dear, how can I manage such a distance? Randall's is so far, I couldn't walk half that way. No, Papa, of course no one expects you to walk. We'll go in the carriage. The carriage, but James won't like putting the horses to for such a short trip. And where are the poor horses to wait while we pay our visit? Asked Mr. Woodhouse. They will be put into Mr. Weston's stable, Papa. You know we settled all of that last night. We talked everything through with Mr. Weston. And as for James, you can be sure he'll always be happy to drive us to Randall's. His daughter is the housemaid there now. In fact, I'm not sure he'll ever want to take us anywhere else again. That was thanks to you, Papa. You got Hannah that position. No one had thought of her until you mentioned her. James is very grateful to you. I'm very glad I thought of her. It was lucky, for I wouldn't want James to feel neglected for anything in the world. And I'm sure she'll make an excellent servant. She's polite and pleasant in her speech. I think very well of her. Whenever I see her, she always curtsies and asks after my health so nicely. And when she comes here to sew, I always notice how she gently turns the lock and never slams the door. She'll be a real help to poor Miss Taylor, I'm sure. Having someone she's familiar with around will be such a comfort, and every time James visits his daughter, she'll hear how we're doing. He'll give her all the news. Emma did her best to keep her father in this more cheerful mood, hoping that with the help of backgammon, she could get him through the evening without any fresh sadness, other than her own. The backgammon table was being set up when a visitor arrived, making it unnecessary. It was Mr. Knightley, a man of sense in his late 30s, not only a long-standing friend of the family, but also Isabella's brother-in-law. He lived about a mile away, visited often, and was always welcome. This evening he was especially so, since he had just returned from London, where he had seen their shared relatives. He had come straight from a late dinner to deliver the good news that all were well in Brunswick Square. This cheered Mr. Woodhouse greatly. Mr. Knightley's warm and friendly manner always lifted his spirits, and his many questions about poor Isabella and her children were happily answered. When their conversation settled, Mr. Woodhouse said kindly, "How good of you, Mr. Knightley, to walk all the way here at this hour. I hope your walk wasn't too dreadful. Not at all, sir. The moonlight is beautiful, and it's so mild out, I find I have to back away from your blazing fire. But surely it must have been damp and muddy. I do hope you don't catch cold. Muddy, sir? Just look at my shoes, not a speck on them. Well, that's quite surprising. We've had so much rain today that it poured terribly for half an hour during breakfast. I wanted them to postpone the wedding. By the way, I haven't congratulated you yet. I knew it wouldn't be quite the joyful celebration for you two, so I didn't rush in with well wishes. But I hope everything went off decently. How did everyone behave? Who cried the most? Ah, poor Miss Taylor. Such a sad affair. Poor Mr. and Miss Woodhouse, if you please, but I really can't call Miss Taylor poor. I like you and Emma dearly, but when it comes to choosing between being dependent or independent, well, surely it's better to have only one person to please than two. Especially, said Emma playfully, when one of those two happens to be a fanciful, troublesome creature. I know exactly what you're thinking, and what you'd be saying if my father weren't in the room. I believe you're quite right, my dear, sighed Mr. Woodhouse. I'm afraid I can be rather fussy and difficult at times. My dearest Papa, how could you imagine I meant you? Or that Mr. Knightley did? What an awful idea. Of course not. I only meant myself. Mr. Knightley likes to tease me, you know. It's always in jest. We say exactly what we think to each other. Mr. Knightley, in truth, was one of the few people who ever noticed Emma Woodhouse's flaws, and the only one who ever dared point them out. While Emma didn't particularly enjoy having her faults called out, she knew her father would be even less pleased to hear such a thing, so she made sure he never suspected that anyone might not consider her perfect. Emma knows I never flatter her, Mr. Knightley said calmly, but I meant no offense. Miss Taylor was used to pleasing two people. Now she'll only have one to consider. She may very well be happier for it. Well, said Emma, letting the comment go, you want to hear about the wedding, don't you? I'll gladly tell you. We all behaved beautifully. Everyone was on time, looking their best. There wasn't a single tear, hardly a gloomy expression in sight. We all felt we were staying so close, only half a mile apart, and knew we'd see each other every day. Dear Emma takes everything so well, said her father fondly. But Mr. Knightley, she really is sad to lose poor Miss Taylor. I know she'll miss her more than she realizes. Emma turned away, half smiling and half on the verge of tears. Of course Emma will miss such a friend, Mr. Knightley said gently. None of us would think so highly of her if she didn't, but she also understands how good this marriage is for Miss Taylor, how valuable it is for a woman at her time of life to have a secure and happy home. Knowing that, Emma can't feel too much sorrow. Anyone who cares for Miss Taylor must be glad she's so well settled. And you've left out one great joy for me, Emma added with a proud smile. I made this match. I brought them together, 4 years ago. So when it all came true, when everyone thought Mr. Weston would never marry again, it's quite a triumph for me. Mr. Knightley shook his head disapprovingly. Mr. Woodhouse, however, said warmly, Ah, my dear, I do wish you wouldn't make matches. Everything you predict always comes true. Please don't make any more. I promise not to arrange any for myself, Papa, but I must for others. It's the greatest fun in the world. And after such a success, everyone said Mr. Weston would never marry again. A widower for so long, perfectly content, always busy with work or friends, cheerful and popular wherever he went. He never had to spend an evening alone unless he chose to. Oh no, people said, he'd never marry again. Some even said he promised his late wife he wouldn't. Others claimed his family wouldn't allow it. So much nonsense, but I never believed a word of it. I made up my mind the day Miss Taylor and I met him on Broadway Lane and it began to drizzle. He ran off so gallantly and brought us umbrellas from Farmer Mitchell's. From that moment I planned the match. And with such success, Papa, how can I possibly stop now? I don't know what you mean by success. said Mr. Knightley. "If you spent the last 4 years actively working on this match, I might call it effort. But if all you did was once think, it would be nice if Miss Taylor married Mr. Weston, and occasionally repeated the thought, 'What are you congratulating yourself on?' It was just a lucky guess." "And have you never felt the pleasure of a lucky guess? I pity you. I thought you more insightful. A lucky guess is never entirely luck. It shows some instinct. And about my supposed success, I think I've earned a little credit. There's a middle ground between doing everything and doing nothing. If I hadn't encouraged Mr. Weston's visits, given little hints, helped smooth out awkward moments, who knows what might have happened. I think you know Hartfield well enough to understand that. Weston is a sincere, open man. Miss Taylor is sensible and genuine. They could manage just fine on their own. I think you're more likely to have caused yourself trouble than helped them." "Emma always puts others before herself," said Mr. Woodhouse proudly, not quite following. "But my dear, do be careful. Matchmaking is a dangerous business, and it breaks up our peaceful home." "Only one more, Papa, just one. For Mr. Elton. Poor Mr. Elton. You like him, don't you? I must find him a wife. There's no one in Highbury good enough for him, and he's been here a whole year. He's set up his house so nicely. It would be a shame if he stayed single. And when he held their hands today at the wedding, I couldn't help thinking he looked like he wished he were the one being married. I think well of Mr. Elton, and this is the only way I know to help him. Mr. Elton is a fine young man, certainly, and I like him a great deal. But if you want to do something for him, my dear, invite him to dinner. That will be much better. I'm sure Mr. Knightley will kindly join us too." "With the greatest pleasure, sir," said Mr. Knightley, laughing. "And I quite agree. It's far better to invite him to dinner and serve him the best fish and chicken than to meddle in his love life. Let him choose his own wife. He's more than capable of managing that on his own."